I do have a theory that when you're in the sun, if you get enough sun exposure and you're outside enough, not being trapped inside is better. But the bottom line is I'm not detoxifying well. And I think that would explain these chronic eye bags. What are the variables I can control? I can control what I put in my mouth. I cannot always control how that was prepared or grown, or is there mold? I can put water filters all throughout my house. I can put a main house filter. I can filter the tap water. There's other variables like I can control. On this episode of the Drtyna Show, I'm going to be talking all about air pollution and your hormones. This is a topic I did not think that I was even going to discover or stumble upon, but I have been deep down the rabbit hole, and oh my God, you guys, like this is a huge deal and nobody's talking about it. So we're going to be breaking it down today on this episode. Let's jump in. All right. So why do I care about this? I recently ran my Dutch test and my detox pathways are all glommed up. I think it's a combination of excessive stress, and I think there was mold in the house that I moved out of in Oregon. That's a story for another day. My husband doesn't want to talk about it. It's one of the reasons I moved to Arizona, although we have crazy mold in Arizona too. I did some remediation on my new house, but I'm sure I could keep testing and maybe keep finding it, to be honest with you. But all that to say, a couple things fell apart in my daily rituals. My exercise got really skewed. Definitely probably having a few more drinks than usual. I am not much of a drinker. So I have 2 MTHFR mutations. So I do not detox like the average human. In fact, from what I've been told, my ability to detox is about 10% of the average human. I don't know if that's excessive or not, but I'll have to get a genomic specialist on here to talk about that. But that said, even the smallest amount of alcohol really sets me over the edge. So even a glass of wine too regularly is what I mean by too many drinks. What else? Gosh, exposure, right? So went through a bunch of old stuff that I know has lived in moldy locations over the years. So I probably had a lot of mycotoxin exposure in there. I went through storage units. I went through, boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff, purging and preparing for the move. So I knew I was getting exposed to stuff there. I moved from a farm, which is in the middle of the biggest grass seed production in the world, like agriculturally, massive grass seeds. So massive glyphosate spray there. Although I moved somewhere where I'm surrounded by golf courses. So we got that going for me too, but at least I got sun. I do have a theory that when you're in the sun, if you get enough sun exposure and you're outside enough that, not being trapped inside with all the stuff that is trying to kill you is better, right? We want to be outside more than anything. So I moved somewhere where I could be outside more because mold is everywhere. A lifetime of mold exposure. And then I think just middle age, estrogens start to get glommy and life happens. My poor liver's 50 some years old. All of this accumulated into what I saw in my Dutch test. But the bottom line is I'm not detoxifying well. And I think that would explain these chronic eye bags, the weight gain, that goes up and down, and just the overall what is happening? I don't feel terrible, but I'm feeling my age, and I'm not as sprightly as I used to be. And I definitely, you guys know my chronic pain journey. So all of that, I was like, I'm going to run the damn tests again. Looked at the Dutch test. In the middle of all of this, as you know, I became a total air snob because I started thinking, what can I control, right? What are the variables I can control? I can control what I put in my mouth. I cannot always control how that was prepared or grown, or is there mold? I mean, shoot, I was reading a Reddit thread the other day, and some lady said when she bit into a date from Costco, the Costco dates, they come in the big containers. My husband loves them. I'm not a big date fan, so I don't expose myself to this much, but it turns out that dates have a massive amount of mold, massive. So she bit into it, and what she said was black ink came out. That wasn't black ink. That was mold. It blew out like dust. So this stuff is what can we control, right? We can control some of those variables, but we can't control how our food's prepared or stored or any of that. And I have been down the orthorexia route where I was just so completely OCD about what I would and wouldn't eat. And I don't want to live like that. I have friends that are still living like that. Bless them. I understand that that is how they need to live. But like, I have done that for so long and I can't live like that. I'm going to eat what I want to eat and I'm not eating terrible food. And I just am at the point of like, I'm not, if I were going to be trying to go on a journey to like really, really eradicate some serious illness, I will double down hardcore on my diet and I will do that intermittently when I need to. But right now it's like, I just have a case of the blahs. So do I need to get OCD about my food again? I don't think so right now. There's other variables I can control. I can put water filters all throughout my house. I can put a main house filter. I can filter the tap water. I can filter the shower water. I've got all that dialed in. I can put air filters in every room. I can control that variable. I can't control the golf courses spraying. I can't control that, but I want to live here. This is where I want to live. So I decide, I know that study came out in the last year saying that there was like 125% increase, 126% increase in Parkinson's for those who live within a quarter of a mile of a golf course. And I was like, oh, great. Right as I was buying the house, but I'm going to live. So it's not like I'm on the golf course. I don't golf. I'm not out there all the time. I'm just going to go with that, right? Like I'm going to filter my water. I think that has something to do with not only what's in the air, but what's in the groundwater. So who knows? We got to live on this planet. We got to make some decisions. And my theory has always been be harder to kill, right? Be more robust. So what can I control? And air is the big one. So I had Mike Feldstein come on from Jasper. You guys probably saw that episode. It's a few back. I'll make sure it's linked in the show notes. Great episode. I shared with you more recently how when I moved into my house, like pretty much the first thing I did was put a Jasper in every single room because again, mold, and I can't control for that. So I put an air filter in literally every single room. They're air scrubbers. They're better than air filters in my opinion, but go listen to those episodes. I did an episode with Mike a year or so ago, and he really dove into the technology of Jasper as well. So we'll make sure all that's in the show notes so you can listen to it. But I want to implore you to become an air snob because of what I'm about to share with you. So let's get to that. I didn't mean to give you such a long intro. I just wanted to explain to you what was going on and why this has been really on my heart and why you know me, I get OCD when I get onto something, and I have been digging into air pollution and air quality and its impacts on a variety of things. And I kind of had covered it all and was like, oh, people have heard all of this. But then I just Googled air pollution and hormones and then air pollution and menopause. And holy smokes, there's a lot of data out there and it is not good, guys. And then speaking of guys, I looked into fertility and I looked into the impacts on men. It is not good. So if you have ever in your life thought about getting an air filter, I want you to think about doing it now. Jasper is having a great sale. It's their biggest sale of the year. They're doing $300 off until the end of December. You get an extra $100 off with my code drtyna. It's drtyna. And that will get you $400 off total, which is a smoking deal. These are excellent machines. I know they seem cost prohibitive, but trust me, there's a big difference between crappy air filters or just, lower economy ones and then air scrubbers. If you're going to invest. And if you can swing it, I highly encourage you to get one for every room in your house. And once I share this with you, you're going to be like, oh, especially if you are a middle-aged human being. If you're a middle-aged man or woman, Gen X, I'm talking to you. We are in a pickle. We are not doing well in our health overall. And it's not because we drink too much. It's the generations before us drank too much. It's because we have been the first generation to be just ladled on with toxins. Our planet has become a very toxic soup. I'm not trying to scare anyone. This is just the reality of it. If this is your first time hearing it, I'm sorry to be the messenger, but we are swimming in a toxic soup. And the question really becomes, how much can your bucket handle? That's it. It's not, freak out and live in a bubble. It is, how do we make you more resilient? Sauna, sweating, exercise, eating as healthfully as you can, getting a good variety of fruits and vegetables to support your detox pathways. Some of us are, like I mentioned in the beginning, some of us are dealt some pretty crappy genetic cards when it comes to detox. And then we hit menopause and we need some hormones, and we try to take the hormones and we feel awful and we don't metabolize the hormones well. That's where I'm at. I'm one of those people. I don't metabolize them well. So I feel amazing on them for a second until my detox pathways are like, hold up, sister, this is not great. So all that to say, I think that the air quality matters way more than I've ever given it credit, and your water as well. I'll make sure to put my favorite water filter in the show notes. At the very least, filter your tap water. If you can swing it, I'll make sure to put my favorite shower filters in there too. People don't seem to think that's a big deal, but your skin absorbs everything. Those are not super high ticket items. The air scrubber is a little bit more high ticket. But it's one of those things like, honestly, I know many people who've reached out to me and said, I'm buying my second Jasper for, I bought the first one last Christmas, last holiday season when they had their big sale. I'm buying my second one and so every year they're buying themselves a Jasper until they get their house handled. I really want to encourage you to consider your children in all of this. Children exhibit issues differently. I was that girl who had chronic allergies, chronic asthma as a kid. So that was like the early, skin issues, not just hay fever and respiratory issues, but like skin issues, behavioral issues, bedwetting. There's all kinds of different ways that a child will present differently than an adult. And I don't want to belabor that. I want to get you this information on the air pollution and the hormones, but children and then your pets, there's a huge uptick in pet allergies. We can all kind of assume the obvious, which is we are vaccinating the crap out of our pets, and pets are different than humans. They just do these things annually. I have beef with that. Big beef. I have big beef with the whole system, but I don't, I digress. But to hit your pets every year annually, way overkill. And you could consider your titers, running titers, right? But why else would pets be showing up with terrible allergies? So their allergies, I don't know if you've ever had a pet with skin issues, but the vet will tell you, oh, it's a respiratory allergy. They're allergic to something around them, and then it's manifesting itself as skin issues, and then they're chewing the heck out of themselves. I've had a lot of dogs. I've seen this before. Yes, I can control for those variables too. My dogs eat the best food I could possibly find. I bathe them regularly. I don't overbathe them. Overbathing them can aggravate their skin as well because you disrupt the skin barrier and the skin mantle. I make sure to provide probiotics and fish oil when necessary. I treat my dogs very well. My dogs live a good life, a good, healthy life. And I've raised many very, very healthy dogs that once I got out of the take your dog to the vet every year cycle and the whole nonsense with that in my early 20s, actually, I realized like I can keep my dogs alive. I've had multiple dogs that lived well into their, mid to later teen years. Knock on wood, because I got to keep the current crop around because they're so special to me. Anyway, what can we do? We can filter their air and their water. So having an air filter where your dogs, I will tell you the dirtiest filters in my house are the ones where the dogs are the most. And sometimes back on the farm, I said this on the last pod, when one of my dogs would plop down with all their dusty fur from the farm, the air filter would come up. We can control what we put on our skin. We can control what we put in our hair. We can control all those variables. I hardly ever wear makeup. So when I do wear makeup, not all, and that's the thing, the clean skin industry is not as clean as you would like it to be. That's a whole other podcast, but we can't control the world and we can't freak out. We can't have OCD about it. But what can we do? So we can filter our air and our water. It's a great place to start. Be cognizant of the food you're putting in your mouth. We can't always get organic. We can't always make sure it was washed. We don't know how the lettuce at the salad, where we're getting the salad out to dinner. We don't know what the cows ate of the steak we're getting. Like, we can't control for all those variables. And I would argue with any vegan any day that vegetables can be significantly more laden with pesticides and herbicides, et cetera, than what's coming through in the meat of an animal. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to argue with anyone. I'm just saying, like, neither side is the solution, because in all cases we are swimming in a toxic soup. So I really want to emphasize air and water filtration. Those are big, big, big levers we can pull. Okay, so check this out. I'm just going to go through a series of studies. First of all, indoor air can be up to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air. And so for women in middle life, middle age, I don't want to say middle age, but like middle life, midlife, these are hormonal disruptors. There's PM 2.5 and there's VOCs. That's what we're going to talk about today. And they've been linked to early menopause, mood swings, and estrogen disruption because they inhibit your detox pathways. The PM 2.5 stands for, I've heard that thrown around, and that's on the Jasper. So Jasper actually has VOC sensors and PM 2.5 sensors, and I didn't know exactly what that meant. It means particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 micrometers or less. These are tiny airborne particles about 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair that can penetrate deep into the lungs and even enter the bloodstream. So sources: vehicle exhaust, industrial emissions, wildfires, burning of fossil fuels, indoor sources like cooking, candles, smoking. You guys get the candles out of your house. I do have some candles I found if you want to. I still don't think that even clean candles are a great idea, but if you go to my Amazon store, I think it's amazon.com/shopping/drtyna or amazon.com/drtyna. We'll put the link. I did list the cleanest candles I could possibly find in there because I did buy some from my house when we first moved in. I have a whole episode where I talked about the LED poisoning that I was enduring. There's chemical mixtures like heavy metals and organic compounds and nitrates and sulfates and carbon-based materials. Anyway, they all add up to these PM 2.5. So as I refer to PM 2.5 throughout this, you will understand what I'm talking about. But there's systemic effects, there's neurologic effects, there's reproductive effects, linked to earlier menopause. All this basically, if you want to get off the podcast right now, toxic air is linked to earlier and more miserable menopause. It's linked to cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, obviously, neurologic effects, systemic effects, inflammation, hormonal disruptions, etc. All right, so first study, associations between exposure to air pollution and sex hormones during the menopausal transition. This was a 2022 study. It examined about 1,800 women aged 45 to 54 from the study of the women's health across the nation, the SWAN study. It investigated the effects of the PM 2.5, nitrous oxide, and ozone on sex hormones during the menopausal transition. The conclusion was that higher exposure to these, what we'll call them toxins, are associated with lower estradiol and progesterone levels and a higher FSH level. So associations were strongest in women in late perimenopause. Hormonal disruption was most evident for older women, those with lower physical activity, and non-obese women. Findings suggest that ambient air pollution may accelerate reproductive aging through endocrine disruption. I want to repeat that. Findings suggest that ambient air pollution may accelerate reproductive aging through endocrine disruptions. The effects remain significant after adjusting for age, BMI, smoking, socioeconomic status, and physical activity. So we could say, oh, well, people who are, less active aren't going to detox as well. People who are younger, older are going to have different detox capabilities. They're smokers, their socioeconomic status. Of course, all of those matter, but even after they adjusted for those, we still had the same effects. So this is a big deal. The next study, traffic pollution, reproductive health, and depressive symptoms in healthy multi-ethnic sample of reproductive age women in the ovarian aging study. This was a January 2025 study. The study analyzed nearly 700 healthy reproductive age women from the ovarian aging study. The focus was on the association between traffic-related air pollution, or TRAP is the acronym, and depressive symptoms. This is important. This is really important, you guys. I think a lot of people probably walk around. I mean, we already have mood shifts and a lot of low mood happening for menopausal women as estrogen leaves the building, and then add to it, insult to injury. TRAP includes particulate matter and nitrogen oxides, common in urban and high traffic environments. The key finding was that TRAP exposure is significantly associated with increased depressive symptoms in women. So there was a link. This was independent, again, of demographic factors and reproductive health variables. However, menstrual cycle characteristics may partially mediate the relationship between TRAP and depression. The study suggests that TRAP exposure may negatively influence both mood and reproductive hormone regulation. Lower socioeconomic status and minority status were linked with higher TRAP exposure, compounding the risk. Unfortunately, people who are living in our city and, where they can't get out and get fresh air as often are going to be hit harder. Prior research has also linked TRAP to earlier puberty, menstrual irregularities, and reduced fertility. I do think that we know that toxic exposure is, I don't think I know that toxic exposure is linked to fertility issues. I didn't realize how much air pollution had to do with it. So the authors want to emphasize that environmental and reproductive health are deeply connected with mental implications. Next study, is air pollution a risk factor for early menopause? This is a 2025 study. It analyzed data from 8,500 Korean women who experienced menopause between 2002 and 2020 using data from the Korean National Health and Nutritional Examination Survey. This linked individual health data with long-term exposure estimates of PM 2.5, PM 10, and nitrous oxide. Early menopause was defined as menopause occurring between ages 40 and 44, normal menopause as 45 or older. Higher long-term exposure to air pollution was associated with increased odds of early menopause. All early menopause cases, 100%, occurred in women exposed to PM 2.5 above a certain level, South Korea's national air quality threshold. So basically, 100% of early menopause cases occurred in women exposed to that South Korea's national air quality threshold. Never smokers and women aged 50 plus were more likely to experience early menopause when exposed to higher air pollution, suggesting increased sensitivity among non-smokers and older populations. That's the other part I forgot to tell you about. I smoked for 10 years. I chain smoked for 10 years, if you can believe it. I can't believe it. From 14 to 24, I smoked a pack a day. So my toxic burden was high. I also grew up in a household where my parents smoked inside for most of my life. And then a lot of hair dye. That was a big reason I quit dyeing my hair, was because I was like, what are the variables I can control for? Hair dye. That's a big one. I have not yet released the podcast I've worked on for years about hair dye. But if you're a lady that's my age and you're dyeing your hair dark, you probably want to stop. It's the data I pulled up years ago when I went gray was like, scared me enough. And I'm a hairstylist daughter. I grew up in a salon, literally. I am a hairstylist daughter. I didn't even know what my hair color was. I had been doing some kind of dye or bleach to it since I was 12 years old. So I had no idea. And that's not, don't get on my mom about it. That was me like demanding to have highlights put in. And then it was either that or I was going to put sun in it. And she was like, no, it'll ruin your hair. So anyway, the author suggests that oxidative stress, inflammation, and hormonal disruption from pollutants may accelerate ovarian aging and follicle depletion. Follicle depletion, you guys, leading to earlier menopause. While causality cannot be established with any of these, because these are obviously correlative, due to the cross-sectional design, the large sample size, and national representativeness strengthen the study's relevance. The study urges policymakers to treat air pollution as a reproductive health risk, particularly for middle-aged women. And now you're saying, why do middle-aged women care about their reproduction? That's not how they mean it. They mean it in relationship to your menopause. Next study, endocrine disrupting chemicals, reproductive aging, and menopause, a review. This is a 2021 study. The key points are the review explores how endocrine disrupting chemicals, called EDCs for short, affect reproductive aging, including timing of menopause. EDCs include substances such as phthalates, BPA, PCBs, dioxins, PFAS, and heavy metals, many of which are airborne pollutants and are carried by dust and fine particulate matter. We can clump those into the VOCs. Okay, so all of these glom onto dust, which is the good news because we can clear it out of the air with an air scrubber. They fall to the floor. This is another reason you don't want to wear your outside shoes inside, right? We want to keep the dust as low as we can in a house, and we want to clean our house regularly. I was raised up to think, oh, you want to clean your house regularly so you don't get asthma or you don't have allergies, but the dust is literally binding up with all of these VOCs and these pollutants, these endocrine disrupting chemicals, and now it is in the dust. Several EDCs are found in air pollution, particularly from traffic emissions, industrial output, and indoor environments. Exposure to EDCs has been linked to earlier menopause, possibly through mechanisms such as accelerated loss of ovarian follicles, disruption of the HPO axis, the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis, and altered hormone synthesis and metabolism. So this is affecting our metabolic health too, ladies. This is why I want to bring this up, because my whole platform is about your metabolic health. Your metabolic health is being compromised by the air quality that you live in. So what can we do? We can scrub it. Human studies cited that women with higher phthalate metabolites experience menopause 2 to 4 years earlier. Persistent organic pollutants have been linked to increased FSH and decreased estradiol. Again, we're seeing this in study after study. Animal studies confirm that prenatal and early life exposure to certain toxins reduces the ovarian reserve and disrupts hormone feedback loops. What does that equate to? That equates to infertility. And we are having a global infertility crisis. There are several reasons, and it's complicated, but I think we could definitely say toxins in the environment are contributing to it. We have so much data on that. That is not a conspiracy theory. Some EDCs, like airborne dioxins, can persist in the body for decades and may exert long-term endocrine effects. This paper underscores a cumulative burden model. So back to the bucket, right? Back to what I was saying, how full is your bucket, and how can you, my bucket feels full. How can we start dumping it? We can sauna. I'll put my links to my favorite sauna. I'm just going to give you the link to the holiday gift guide, and that will get you to all of the things with all the deals. Right now, everybody's having crazy end of year sales, holiday sales. So this is the time to buy. If you are a health practitioner, I just want to let you know, because I had a mastermind for years and years and years, and a lot of the docs I coached didn't really know this. And I didn't know this when I was a young doctor. If you buy something nice for your clinic every year, you can write that off. So if you're going to use it with your patients, of course. So having a nice sauna in your clinic is not only a write-off, but it is a revenue generator. So you can be making money off the sauna. You can be using the sauna, and you also get the nice write-off for the end of the year. That decreases your tax burden. I am not a CPA, but this is just a known fact. The paper underscores this cumulative burden model. Long-term low-dose exposure to multiple toxins contributes to hormonal aging. This highlights the need for more research on combined effects, because that's the other variable here we're not talking about, is what happens when you mix them. And I'm not going to get into that here, but I have a pretty decent understanding of this. And it's not just the one thing. It might be like in the case of, I won't mention it because it'll get me in trouble on YouTube, but a popular weed killer, it's not even so much that ingredient as it is the surfactant that is mixed with it so that it sticks to the leaves. And that combo is what they think might be, at least from some of the data I've read, really potentially the problem. So this combined effects of these toxins and what happens when they get together and have a party. So anyway, and their interactions with socioeconomic and lifestyle factors. Next study, air pollution and decreased bone mineral density among Women's Health Initiative participants. So looking back at the Women's Health Initiative study, the one that got everybody scared of prescribing hormones, this was a 2023 write-up in The Lancet. The study examined 9,000 postmenopausal women from the Women's Health Initiative across the United States. Researchers assessed the association between long-term exposure to ambient air pollution and bone mineral density decline. Now, this is exciting information for me to learn about because my whole jam was orthopedic medicine. Essentially, I was doing regenerative orthopedic medicine in my clinic that's what I did forever. So this, anytime, the reason this came up was because I'm always like, what's it doing to the bones? What's it doing to the muscles? How does it relate to pain? Right. So anyway, they looked at the lumbar spine, the total hip, and the femoral neck. PM 2.5 had the strongest and most consistent association with bone mineral density loss. Ozone showed a weaker but still statistically significant association in some skeletal sites. The estimated annual bone loss attributed to PM 2.5 exposure was comparable to aging one additional year, particularly at the lumbar spine. The study adjusted for confounders such as age, BMI, smoking, physical activity, hormone therapy, and socioeconomic status. So even with hormone therapy, we're still seeing accelerated bone loss with high levels of toxic exposure. Findings suggest that air pollution is an under-recognized risk factor for osteoporosis and fractures in postmenopausal women. The authors call for integrating environmental exposures into clinical assessments of bone health. As a naturopathic physician, any good naturopathic physician will ask you about your environmental exposure. That's part of our history and intake. It's like, where did you grow up? What were you around? Blah, blah, blah. But I think really starting to ask people, do you have an air filter in your house? Do you have one in every room? Do you filter the water in your house? If you're a clinician listening or a health practitioner, you maybe want to add that because this matters. Next study, fine particulate matter and ovarian health, a review of emerging risks. This is a 2024 study. This basically looked at the effects of PM 2.5 on female reproductive health. And again, we're just kind of going over the same. They're finding the same thing. This fine particulate matter is associated with multiple forms of ovarian dysfunction, including diminished ovarian reserve, PCOS, and infertility. And this is why I bring it up, because PCOS and infertility, these are big ones, right? Why does it seem like almost every young woman has PCOS these days? That's really common, whether it's diagnosed or not. I think toxicity might have something to do with it. PM 2.5 exposure correlates with decreased levels of different hormones, which are key indicators of ovarian reserve. A study in China showed that even just a small increase of PM 2.5 was associated with a 2.1% reduction in these hormones. Occupational and residential exposures, traffic, indoor heating also linked. Animal studies show that PM 2.5 exposure decreases follicle counts and increases follicular apoptosis, which is when your cells off themselves, they blow themselves up. That's what follicular apoptosis. Apoptosis is like programmed cell death, contributing to early ovarian aging. PCOS, PM 2.5 exposure may increase PCOS risk. Korean cohort, 3-year exposure increased PCOS risk by 32%. Now, I don't know what that 3-year exposure was, but maybe that was like 3 years of living in the city or 3 years of living around high exposure, but a 32% increase. Chinese study, highest quartile of PM 2.5 exposure had almost a 4% increased risk of PCOS. So I think we can definitely put our finger on something here. Potential mechanisms, the activation of the HPA axis contributing to hormonal imbalance and hyperandrogenism. So that's the hallmark of, high androgens is the hallmark of PCOS. Infertility. This is a big one, you guys. Humans are going extinct. I don't have a better way to say it. I've been saying this for years, and it's just happening and nobody wants to talk about it. But if you actually look at most countries, we're not having enough babies to replace us. So we're in trouble. Exposure to PM 2.5 is associated with lower fertility rates in population studies from China, Spain, and Denmark, higher risk of embryo transfer failure, and reduced success rates in IVF clinics. One of the first things that we do in my medicine is that we look at when a woman's having a hard time conceiving, or a man, the very first thing we do is clean up the terrain of both partners. And this can take, I would say, I tell patients, minimum of 9 months, in excess of a year. So you got to clean up the eggs and the sperm. And that means we start with sauna and we start to reduce toxic burden and we start to clean up the terrain. And voila, oftentimes people will have successful pregnancies or successful IVF experiences. Again, podcast for another day, but holy smokes, the rates of IVF are off the charts. It's crazy. I rarely speak to a woman in her 30s who has told me that she is able to get pregnant naturally. I don't know what's going on. I've mentioned this on other podcasts, and it's a really touchy subject, so I haven't I haven't breached it yet, but man, I think that it's just a signal to me, the fact that we're seeing so much IVF and the need for so much IVF, that it's really starting to concern me about humans' overall ability to replicate. PM 2.5 exposure linked to impaired outcomes in both natural conception and assisted reproductive technologies. PM 2.5 induces oxidative stress, which causes mitochondrial damage, DNA damage, and apoptosis in granulosa cells of the ovaries. Inflammation is also a major pathway. PM 2.5 exposure increases pro-inflammatory cytokines like interleukin 6, TNF alpha. So if you're somebody, what does this mean to you? If you're somebody who is really autoimmune, you've got autoimmune disease raging, you're middle age, you've got pain, you've got issues, you're puffy, you don't feel good, look at your toxic burden. Do you need to test it? I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. I do think that implementing a regular, ritual of sauna in your life, making sure you're exercising and moving, making sure you're drinking clean air and breathing clean air as best you can, dry skin brushing. I'm not big on big parasite cleanses and, I think some of those are like way too big of a hammer for people. But that's just me. You do you. I'm not trying to fight with anyone. I know that's a big topic these days online, and I know it's life-changing for some, but I think at the very least, start with how can you reduce your toxic burden and variables you can control. And young women, I said this on Diary of a CEO when I was over on Stephen Bartlett's podcast in London. Young women, I'm very concerned with the amount of makeup and the 10 layers of serums and the nails and the hair and all the things. Like, these are heavy toxic burdens. It's interesting because I'll hear people talk about wanting to like clean up their liver and, lead a cleaner, more toxin-free lifestyle, but then they'll like put themselves through some major toxin whomps, right? Like maybe it'll be a lot of cosmetic procedures, right? Maybe it'll be a lot of hair dye. And I was in this. I did this. I lived this. I'm talking to myself. I was over here talking to patients about toxicity burden, and then I was dyeing my hair every 2 to 3 weeks. And so the gray roots didn't come through because I had dark hair, and I was, I didn't ever do nails, thank God, but like nails are a big toxic burden in my opinion. And the makeup and even being in the hair salon or the nail salon, I can't walk into a nail salon without being like gasping because I can't breathe. So there's just a lot that we can manage. And I think a lot of beauty overall, young women, older women are in this chronic race to stay young looking, and young women are trying to look older. But in all of it, we're like bathing in toxins. So it adds up and your bucket gets full. So you can take all the TUDCA and supplements to detox your liver, but if you're just like piling it on at the same time, right? We have to just look at the balance here, and everybody's balance is different. Everybody's tolerance to it is different. And that's my rant. I'll get off my high horse here. Okay. There are some reproductive studies out there. I'm not going to go into them because I think I've already hammered this one, but yes, exposure to pollutants in the air definitely linked to reproductive issues across multiple countries. Fertility issues, delayed contraception, sperm quality, etc. Air pollution is definitely linked. Again, correlative, not causative. Multiple countries. VOC and phthalates. So VOCs are what I mentioned. I think I already covered this, but I found multiple studies that were decent, multi-ethnic, midlife, decent sized cohorts looking at urinary phthalates and hormones over time, looking at VOCs in the air and hormones. And again, we're just seeing the same thing over and over again. So I just wanted to address that. Reduced testosterone levels in men, sperm quality, fertility. These are problems. Ovarian reserve in women. So I'm not going to go through all of this because it just is depressing. I had a class in naturopathic medical school. It was my third year and it was called environmental medicine. And for the first hour, the instructor would share with you, and it was at 7:30 in the morning. And she would share with you from 7:30 to 8:30, all the horrific things that you were used, all the products, like brand name that you were using on the regular and what they were doing to your body. And then the second hour was what you could do about it, which wasn't a lot. It's everything I'm already telling you, right? I mean, it's really hard to get some of these things out. I know there's bigger treatments out there like EBU and plasmapheresis, but running your blood through putting heparin to thin your blood and then running it through a filtration device and then back into you is kind of a big deal. I'm not against it. I am very much a fan of it when needed, but it's becoming almost like a spa treatment at this rate that I'm seeing, and clinics are picking it up and doing it. And I'm hearing horror stories from some of my friends in the biohacking community, and it's become sort of very casual. This is not casual. This is potentially dangerous. And so going into one of these therapies, like it's just like, oh, it's no big deal. I would disagree. As somebody who did a lot of ozone, blood IV procedures, a lot of IV therapy, spent decades in clinics doing a lot of IV therapy. IV therapy is not a casual spa procedure. So if you need those procedures, I'm not trying to scare you, but don't think, oh, because it's popular on Instagram and it's, I'm just going to do it. A lot of these clinics are seeing not only the potential, but the financial potential in their clinics. And so I can tell this because I'm on the receiving end. I get the emails from the reps, right? I get the emails from the companies selling these gizmos, and it's really booming right now. So just make sure if you do this, you're working with somebody who really knows what they're doing. So lots of hormonal disruption and dysfunction with the VOCs, the phthalates, and the air pollution. And then thyroid function. I wanted to mention this just at the end. Volatile organic compounds exposure with risk of thyroid function in U.S. general populations. This was the NHANES 2007 to 2012 study. Analysis of VOC exposure and thyroid hormones in a national sample of adults using this data. The VOCs were linked to an increase in free T3 and reduced free T4, free T3 ratio. Sex-specific effects observed. VOCs had stronger hormonal effects in females, especially those age 60 plus. So as we get older, we sort of lose that resilience to detox. While not focused on sex hormones, this study suggests VOCs may disrupt hormonal systems broadly, including the thyroid, and it provides indirect evidence that VOCs can alter hormonal balance in midlife and older women. So just wanted to throw that out there. And then a few studies I pulled up in men. And yes, men, you are being impacted by this as well. They were looking at urinary VOC metabolites and serum sex hormones and basically concluded that air pollution, cigarette smoke, household products were negatively associated with total and free testosterone levels and increased estradiol levels. We don't want that. We don't want that balance changing, right? And then with bioavailable testosterone gets bound up by sex hormone binding globulin when you potentially are having exposure to toxins. So yeah, there's a couple different mechanisms here. Oxidative stress, again, endocrine disruption, but basically lower your toxic burden as best you can. And then ambient air pollution and semen quality in China, a nationwide case control study of 27,000 males with biomarker confirmed semen pathology. And this is a big study, right? They looked at 27,000 men aged 20 to 45 and confirmed semen quality issues. So basically what they found was that higher exposure to PM 2.5 and nitrogen dioxide led to significantly increased risk of poor semen quality. PM 2.5 was the most consistent predictor of reduced sperm concentration and motility. Living in areas of high levels of toxins also increased risk of asthenospermia, which is low motility. Risk remained after controlling for age, occupation, smoking, alcohol use, BMI, and heat exposure. Heat exposure is important when it comes to sperm health and quality. Regional variation, semen quality was worst in eastern and central China where pollution is highest, and the mechanism likely involves, again, oxidative stress, inflammation, and endocrine disruption caused by the air pollutants. So that's it. That's all I got for you. I didn't want to keep going because, like I said, that class that I took in a naturopathic college, we would all leave crying. We would leave class crying, feeling hopeless, not sure what to do, overwhelmed. And I don't want to leave you guys feeling that way. So again, I'm going to repeat, what can we do? I'm a big fan of watching what you put in your mouth, eating as clean of ingredients as you can find. I know that's like a wellness tag word, and I hate that it's turned into that, but I literally mean it. Like, try to buy organic when you can. Don't sweat it if you can't. Don't freak out if you can. I know that is a contentious subject. Everything's contentious anymore, but when you can, consider it. Let's put it this way. If it has a peel on it and you can peel it off, then don't worry about it. If it is produce that is like lettuce, berries that have a lot of porosity, blueberries, those types of things, consider buying organic. If you can't, again, don't sweat it. We were just at the grocery store the other day, and the things that I wanted were not available organically. And when I did find them, they were ridiculously expensive. And I just opted for the regular, and I washed them. You can buy different vegetable washes. You can use vinegar water to wash your, soak it in vinegar water. There's lots of ways to start to get rid of some of that. I will say with apples, they spray, and some other vegetables and fruits, they spray them with a coating. And I know that the Bill Gates appeal thing is a whole thing. I don't want to get into that. But if you feel a waxy coating, just know that that's going to be hard to just rinse off. So I do opt for the organic apples, definitely when I can. Sweat as much as you can. And if that's a hot bath, if that's a sauna, if that's exercise, all of it's great. Although with a hot bath, you might reabsorb some of those toxins. After you sauna, take a shower to get the toxins off your skin. Make sure that you don't just sit there I am the worst with that sometimes. I'll sauna and then I get busy, and then it's an hour later and I'm like, oh no, I'm reabsorbing all these toxins I just tried to sweat out. Exercise is great because we start to get different metabolic pathways going. And so we start to get phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification going in our liver. A very simple thing to remember about liver detox. Phase 1, once we get through phase 1, we often end up with intermediates that are worse than the original product. So when we talk about pharmaceutical drugs or, hormones or whatnot, once we get those intermediates in us, if we're not pooping regularly, if we're not peeing regularly, we have a problem. And then we need phase 2 to work well. So phase 2, exercise, protein, we need those amino acids to get phase 2 up. Stress reduction is huge, you guys. But that's all lifestyle, right? And there's more. We can dry skin brush. We can just be careful what we put on our skin, etc. But we can filter our water and our air. Those seem like the, low-lying fruit. Those seem like the easiest ones to grab onto. I know that can be cost prohibitive for some, but start where you can. Start with one thing. One good water filter. I like AquaTrue. I like their glass canister. I think that's nice. Your refrigerator and freezer, that filter that's in there, I think it's garbage. I would not rely on that. I would get yourself a countertop, AquaTrue. I'll put the link. They're having a great sale right now with the holidays. Great. Like best time of the year to buy those too. And then the Jasper air scrubber, I absolutely adore. It's beautiful. It's good looking. It looks good in all my rooms. It is whisper quiet. That's my favorite part. It's whisper quiet. And then it has this is huge. Remember my podcast, I talk about LED poisoning. I swear that's how it feels. It's happening right now, right? I'm under all these lights. They have a button you can push and the whole thing goes dark. And it is the tiniest little glow of LED. I'm going to talk to Mike. I do think that they need to create some kind of felt top, that like a wool felt top they can put over the screen, just the touch screen. It's a beautiful device, the way that it's engineered, beautiful touch screen, but just the tiniest little hum glow. It's so much less than some of the other big air filtration devices out there that are like, because I have one of those and I'm not dissing it, but it's plastic, it's noisier. And when I walk into the room in the middle of the night, like there's the giant LED glow of that air filtration device. I'm not going to name names, but that really bothers me. So that was my favorite feature about the Jasper. When we first got the first one, I have my whole house in Oregon outfitted with them too. When we first got the first one, I was like, dude, the light turns off. That's huge for your circadian rhythm. And then it's whisper quiet. So beautiful machine. Very well made, very well designed. Love those guys. Great company. They are doing incredible things in the world. Go listen to the last podcast if you want to hear more. Make sure it's in the show notes. And right now, if you go to the link in the show notes, it's just jasper.com. It's JASPR.com drtyna, drtyna. Make sure if that doesn't automatically apply the code, put the code in at the checkout and it'll give you an additional $100 off the already major sale they're having for the holidays. And this is only through the end of December. So again, to you clinicians listening, if you have a brick and mortar, you should have an air filter in every single room. Every treatment room. If you're a dentist, you should have one at every single station. If you're a hairstylist, you should have one at every single station. These are write-offs to your business. Okay. So again, I'm not your accountant, talk to your accountant, but these are write-offs. These are business expenses. And I am a huge fan. I was telling my hairstylist the other day, I'm like, you got to get an air filter in here. It's that big of a deal, especially if you're doing chemical procedures all day. In fact, I think most hairstylists should have a hood over the top of their chair, if we're being honest here, but or at least get an air scrubber next to you. So, all right, guys, love you all. Hope this was helpful. I will see you on the next round. So everybody thought, okay, mice studies, tirzepatide must be really protective to metabolic health and there's no appreciable metabolic adaptation. So Yahoo, and they erroneously apply this to humans, which we do, this is why I always try to clarify these were rodent studies or not, because it doesn't always translate to humans.